Goku stirred awake and slowly opened his eyes. The ship had woken him up, and outside the viewport he could see a planet somewhat in the distance, but by the way the ship was keeping course he knew that's where they were headed. He looked down in his arms to see Frieza still sleeping soundly with his tail wrapped around Goku's leg and arms wrapped around his chest and head buried in the crook of his neck. "Frieza," Goku said lightly, alerting the prince. "Are we there, Goku?" "Yes, looks like we are going to be there in a while. I can see it from here." Frieza looked to his side and stared out the viewport at the planet in the distance they were approaching. The ship is in its approach phase. It allows for the Saiyans to wake before doing a flyby and then landing. Goku was quite surprised by that bit of info. "I thought you didn't know anything about these ships." Frieza just shrugged. "I don't. I just saw how the Saiyans used them after all they created them." The prince froze. Maybe it's not such a good idea to keep speaking about the Saiyans, and then he mentally promised himself to shut his mouth. He had no idea if this sweet caring nature of the Saiyan could just disappear and be replaced by that hateful gaze that struck fear into his core. Whatever happened, he knew he wanted this Saiyan. No, he wanted Goku as he was now, and he could see, even if confused and seemingly conflicted at times, that Goku wanted the same. After all, he had promised to take care of him. The planet drew closer and closer, but they paid it no mind, choosing to focus on what they had to do now that they were awake. "How long do you think we have been sleeping, Frieza?" The Ice Gen twisted in his grasp and looked at the gauges. "A few solar cycles." "Quite a while." Goku nodded his head. That wasn't the answer he was looking for, but it would do for now. The planet drew closer and the ship started shaking a bit. "We must be hitting the atmosphere, probably landing soon." Goku looked back at Frieza, who had turned back into him, bracing himself around the Saiyan. "I always found the way the Saiyans landed in these things barbaric, always lacked elegance." Frieza froze again. "There goes my big mouth." He looked up from Goku's chest where he was currently resting his head and saw that Goku didn't seem even bothered. "I get what you mean, Frieza. When Vegeta and Nappa landed on Earth, it caused a lot of damage. It looked like they were aiming for cities on purpose." Frieza only nodded his head, confirming Goku's theory. "That's what they usually do when clearing a planet." Goku only nodded before looking down at Frieza and giving him a kiss on his forehead that surprised the former tyrant. "So let's make sure that doesn't happen. Help me make sure we don't hit anything or anyone down there." Frieza turned to the controls and looked out the viewport as the pod started violently shaking. He waited till the plasma burning up against the ships faded and looked out. He saw what appeared to be a city and turned around, sitting in Goku's lap with his back to the Saiyan's chest, wrapping part of his tail on his arm. He began typing calmly even as everything around them shook, and Goku only looked on as he worked, his hand sometimes wandering down Frieza's waist, eliciting a silent shriek and shiver from him that put a smile on his face and had his mind roaming with ideas. Frieza finished changing course. "It seems from the logs that this planet was due for clearance as an order from me a while ago." "Are you worried about them knowing who you are?" Frieza just laughed. "Me worrying about them knowing me?" The great Frieza Strong. He didn't finish that sentence as he remembered that he had been defeated by the same person who he now sat in the lap of, as if they had known each other their whole lives. Almost as if sensing the mood, Goku wrapped his two massive arms around him, sensing him stiffen momentarily before he relaxed. Goku pulled him closer, pressing him firmly but gently to his chest. "Remember, I'm not going to hurt you. The only reason I ask is that if someone might want to attack you, so I'm ready for it." The former tyrant felt himself melt into the embrace even as the pod violently shook. "Either than you and that idiot monkey Vegeta. No one else has ever seen this form." He felt Goku nod before pressing his chin to the top of Frieza's head. "Ready?" "Yes." Boom. The pod landed with a massive crash, leaving a sizable crater. The two in the pod were fine. Frieza had even felt Goku momentarily use his power to lessen their impact, even if on Namek they proved he didn't need it. The door to the pod opened as the dust was still swirling and Frieza didn't know whether to just fly off or wait for Goku to give the go-ahead. The last thing he needed was him thinking he was about to make an attempt to run. "Frieza, are you okay to walk?" He nodded his head as he felt the embrace that he was secured and be removed, and he felt himself miss it. "Okay, then let's get going and see what's the situation here." Frieza slowly stepped out of the pod on shaky legs. He had been injured after their fight, even after getting whatever thing that healed him and being asleep for a couple of cycles. A stretch was necessary. He felt himself wobble a bit before he felt those arms wrap around him from behind again. "Easy now, I think we both got some spaghetti legs. It's going to take a minute before we are okay." "Who goes there?" a voice shouted from the edge of the crater. "Show yourself." Frieza was about to raise his hand in a death beam, but Goku held it. "Easy, Frieza, we don't know who these people are, so easy on the trigger finger." Frieza reluctantly brought down his hand, pouting at Goku even as his tail unconsciously wrapped around the Saiyan's waist. A being popped up and a few more stared down at the crater. "Who